video, we will dive into how to not only conduct a science fair project, but we will also give helpful hints to make your project go smoother. We will also explain a fun real-life experiment about growing plants on Mars.
How do you even come up with a question?
To come up with a question, you have to look at the world around you and see what's in the news. Our question is, how can you grow plants on Martian soil? How much research should I do in my project?
You have to do as much research as you can so you can go in with a better understanding about your project. For example, with our initial research, we found out that there's perchlorates in the soil and that it's denser than our soil and drains much faster. Without doing our initial research, we would have never known.
What is an independent and dependent variable?
That's a good question. So the independent variable is what you actually change. So in our instance, our independent was the type of soil and the dependent is the results of what you changed. So our dependent variable was the height and the color of the plants.
How do I know my results are different than what regularly happens?
This is why you need a control. A control is something that stays the same throughout the whole experiment. Our controls were how much the plants are watered, temperature, and amount of light. As you begin to start your project, make sure you keep a journal which includes all background research and anything that has to do with your project. This is also where you record your observations and data. When you are collecting your data and observations, make sure you date everything so you don't get lost by the numbers. Additionally, make sure you take plenty of pictures to aid in explaining your project, and also they will be helpful when putting together a board. Lastly, work on your project in a timely manner, meaning don't wait till the last minute to do your project.
Your first paragraph is the introduction. This is where you will write important background information that is key to understanding the purpose of your project, as well as why your project is beneficial to society. For example, our paragraph would include the upcoming Mars exploration, as well as the importance of being able to grow plants in Martian soil in order to promote life on Mars. Overall, your intro needs to have your initial research, as well as your problem and importance of your project.
Down all steps you take to make a procedures list. You want to write it in a way that anyone can understand it, even if they had no prior knowledge on the topic. Also, you need to make a list of all the materials you used in your project.
After you collected your data, you need to do some analysis on it. Some simpler methods are finding the mean, average, or range. For example, to find the mean, you add the numbers together to get a total, then divide the total by the number of values. There are some more complex ways to analyze, one of which is standard deviation. This will show the standard amount of deviation from the mean. For this project, however, since we're trying to see plants' growth, we take the data points and put them into a graph. Collecting data is very important to having a great project because you need a way of proving change that is quantitative, which means comparing it to the quantity and not quality. Qualitative, on the other hand, would be if you said you got bigger or smaller. But those observations, although they are true, can be subjective depending on who's making them. So overall, find a method of analysis that best fits your data.
After you have collected your data, it's time to do the results. Your results are the explanation of your data. Our results were overall surprising. For example, in the first experiment, there was actually a tomato that grew. However, all of the other plants in the Martian soil all suffered from a lack of nitrogen and poor drainage, which ultimately caused the plants to begin to turn yellow. In the second terrarium, the results were the same except there was a drastic difference in the growth of the squash. The squash growing in the Martian soil started decaying at a quicker rate compared to the Earth soil. And in the third terrarium, the plants, specifically the okra, are yellowing less, and this is because of the addition of the NPK. One of the last sections of your project is your conclusion. In your conclusion, you need to talk about if your hypothesis was supported, your results, what outside influence could have impacted your results, and how you can continue this project. For example, in our project, the conclusion was that some plants were able to grow in the Martian soil, but others did very poorly. However, we added either cardstock or NPK, which is a fertilizer that does not make plants inedible for human consumption. Once these were added, the plants began thriving again in the Martian soil. So overall, our hypothesis was somewhat supported. It is there were plants that did terribly in the Martian soil, but some of the other plants did better in the Martian soil, especially with the additives. Some things that could have impacted the results are how the plants have been growing for a longer time.
The next step is writing your application paragraph. This is where you will put your real-world implications of what your experiment discovered. In other words, how your results can be applied to the real world and be used to make changes to how something is done. The judges love to hear how your project is beneficial to society. If your project has a significant and real-world application, your project will be more appealing to judges. When you are presenting, make sure you emphasize this part of your project.
The last section is your bibliography. This is an important section because you need to be able to prove you didn't plagiarize anyone. To make a bibliography, you need to copy all website addresses from any website you use for research and put it into APA format. You can either put this on your board or keep it in your journal where you can pull it out easily if asked about it.
The board is what the judges see first. If they see an unorganized board that is messy and has no order, then they might not think as highly of your project. Also, try not to have too many colors because it might draw the judge's attention away from the content of your project. On the day of science fair, you will have a table with tape outlining your space available for your board. It fits a large trifold board comfortably. Make sure your board and any objects you might be using to help present your project fit in the given space. This is extremely important to note because this is the only amount of space that you will be given. You should try to order the information on your board in the order which you're going to present in. One order that many people do is introduction, problem hypothesis, procedures, data and graphs, results, conclusion, application, and bibliography.
Using information from our Martian farm project, we're able to actually determine things such as where would be a good place on Mars to put a Martian farm. So right now I'm in the open space application, which allows me to visualize Mars. And for one of our other projects, we decided that putting a Martian farm would make a lot of sense in Melas Chasma because of some of the features of Melas Chasma, such as the fact that at the bottom of the Valles Marineris, which is where the Melas Chasma is, the air pressure is twice as much as on the surface of Mars, which is important since Mars has such a thin atmosphere. Plus, since it's so close to the equator, it actually has a lot higher temperatures than on the rest of Mars. So it gets up to where it's actually like the melting point, so you can have liquid water a lot easier than you would be able to on other parts of Mars. Additionally, we thought that this would be a good idea since you can get better protection from the dust storms and the UV light from the sun, so you can tunnel into the sides of Melas Chasma, and it has some parts of it that are wider and flatter, making it easier to land on. So doing things like our Martian farm experiment, it is relevant to this because finding out what kind of conditions the plants do well in and which parts of the Martian environment are most harmful to the plants will help us pinpoint which areas we need to focus on dealing with so we can have the best location on Mars for the farmers.
These are the final results for the Mars soil experiment.